Hello, and thank you so much for dropping by this video. So, this is after 31 years in the spiritual journey in this lifetime. I've come to the conclusion that there's really only three things that matter in life. That there's only three things that life is really about, and that spiritually, there's really only three focuses, hmm, three things to put our attention into that are worthwhile. The first one is service. And the order of these is not exact, but service. So if our life is not about contributing to someone other than ourselves, if the act of contributing and giving isn't a primary orientation that we have, we're really missing the purpose of life. And we're missing the spiritual path. What we're here not just to do, but to learn how to do better and better. We're here to love and to serve and to give. And there's that question: is it more delicious to love or to be loved? Now the answer seems easy. Well, of course, I want love. I want to be loved. But I'm talking about the actual experience. When someone really loves us, yum. But when we really love someone, oh, yum, times 10. And then when we put that love into action to where we just want to give and contribute to that person. And then on top of that, when we find the joy in just giving, period, for not because it's someone we're in love with, but just the joy of giving. And so, in the Indian tradition, they have a whole path called karma yoga, which many people think of as just selfless service. But actually, karma yoga is orienting your entire life towards service, recognizing that the purpose of life is to serve life, and finding that life in essence is this dance, and finding your very specific part in that dance, and then doing it to the best of your ability. Whether that be a very simple job, pump, well, we don't really, people generally pump their own gas, but nowadays, but whether that be be working at a cashier, a very simple as a cashier, a very simple task, all the way up to, a very complicated task, running a giant corporation. The principle is the same: to do what you're doing out of the sake of service to God, to life, and to this world. It's a beautiful, beautiful way to orient our life. And in that process of service, it begins to melt the ego. It begins to melt this grabbing tendency, which leads to the second major, major focus of life, but specifically on the spiritual path, and that is freedom. To come to the place, I call it unconditional happiness, right? We're all seeking conditional happiness, like, oh, I want to go see that movie, or oh, I want a new relationship, or oh, I want a new hairdo, because I'll feel good temporarily when I get that thing. When I get the new car, the new house, the new job, the new relationship, or when my relationship gets better, or when this such and such thing in my health gets better, right? It's like we're looking for happiness, and the strategy is like, oh, if I get that thing, that will make me happy. Well, no, actually, it won't make you happy. It'll give you pleasure, and pleasure is just a temporary form, a very fleeting temporary form of happiness. And so, freedom, from a spiritual point of view, in the West we call it salvation. In the East, in Eastern philosophies, they more call it liberation, or freedom, um, the cessation of suffering in Buddhist terms. But there's this spiritual idea that it is actually possible for us to be free of suffering and to be at peace under all circumstances. And it's a worthwhile endeavor if you think about it, to be free of suffering. And so there are many spiritual paths and many spiritual teachings that are like, hey, I want to be able to astrally project, or I want to be able to transmit healing energy with my hands, or I want to open my third eye. And all of that's interesting. All of that's, you know, kind of fun in a sense, but none of it leads to freedom. None of it leads to liberation from suffering. I'm not saying don't. I'm not saying don't um, put zero time, energy, and attention to such things. If you're drawn to such things, then follow that draw. But keep in mind what we all, our deepest yearning is to be free and to free others from suffering. Again, going back to the first, of being of service. And those things are cool, you know, psychic abilities, learning about other dimensions, but they're not going to lead to freedom. And so the third principle is what I call actualization. You could call it evolution, um, but actualizing our potential. So it's one thing to achieve that state of peace, but then it's another thing to live it. And right, so it's easy to experience it while meditating. Well, it becomes easy over time. Initially, some people feel like they're going crazy when they meditate, but to then have that peace solidly within ourselves and then go out into the world and live it, or to have wisdom or compassion or love or whatever spiritual or divine principle you're talking about, and then go out and to actually live it. And that's what I mean by actualization. And of course, the only reason to actualize is so that we can become a better servant of life, a better being, becoming better at serving. So it becomes this beautiful circle. And why are we seeking? Why are we seeking freedom? And this is one of the things I love about Buddhism is it's the idea of I want to achieve enlightenment so that I can free others from suffering. Otherwise, it's a very selfish endeavor. It'll just feed the ego more. So the three really fit together of yes, I want to become free of suffering so that I can better serve. Yes, I want to evolve and grow so that I can better serve. And I want to serve because that leads to freedom. It keeps me from fixating on me. And service is the most satisfying thing in the world. And so it decreases this grabby tendency that we all have. So service becomes a vessel for freedom, and service also helps us to actualize, you know, this potential inside of us. We all have, cross tradition. There's this idea of the divine or something sacred inside of us. And there's this impulse to actualize it. In Buddhism, they straight up say in Mahayana Buddhism, one particular, the most popular school of Buddhism, they straight up say the meaning of life is to become a Buddha. And a Buddha is a free and omniscient, like it's like Superman on steroids, sort of like having these vast capacities and powers and being at one with everything and having a life completely dedicated to service. So personally, it's this Buddhist desire for enlightenment, not just for my own sake, and actualization of becoming this amazing cosmic being, but not just for my sake, but for the sake of serving. And so for me, it's that the Buddhist, and it's interestingly enough, in early Christianity, that was That's why early Christians believed that Christ came. And one of the early church fathers said, God became man so that man could become God. This idea of we're on this evolutionary journey. But why do we want to become more like God? So we can just wander around and, like, you know, have adventures and just, or do we want to become more divine, more actualized, more like Christ so that we can help others? So once again, you see the circle. So thank you so much for dropping by this video. And I wish you a day of seeking freedom for the sake of others and seeking to actualize your potential so as um, to be of service. Most of all, what I wish for everyone here is a life devoted to service. That just kind of, you know, being in communion with the divine, with the sacred, and then extending that. I think that's maybe the easiest way to say it, to receive and then extend. Thank you so much.